And we're back. Welcome to my car. If you haven't watched any other previous videos, I'll just explain it again. So I'm in this nice soundproof environment with a lamp that's really causing me some grief because it's making it quite hot in here, and there's not much ventilation. And there's also some recording equipment or podcast equipment, my laptop. I'm using the webcam on my laptop. The only thing that's really changed is it's just up on some pizza boxes this time, just to bring the camera closer to eye level so I'm not talking down to you. So yeah, and the reason that I'm doing this is just to support some regular content that I'm punching out on my website. And I've been writing blog posts and then recording a video to support it, and then uploading that to YouTube and just seeing where the wind takes me in terms of my thinking and language and practicing speaking openly. Yeah. So the recent blog post I put on my website is called Divisive Division, and that blog post is it wasn't that difficult to write as when compared to recording this video, which has been very difficult because it's such a polarized issue, the topic of the blog post. And what I successfully was able to do with the blog post was avoid language which I think the general public has been saturated with. And the reason that's important to me, I'll just go on a little tangent briefly. Just when you look at something like climate change, people hear about it again and again and again, and inevitably people just tune out and go on with their lives unless it's directly impacting them, which is, fair enough, to be honest. Getting a doomsday reminder in the news and the general media every day is, it's not a healthy thing for your mind, and I don't really think it. I don't think it helps the cause, and I don't think it actually results in any long-lasting change. There's lots of other ways to tackle issues rather than just being an alarmist and forcing people to agree with you, which is what a lot of those do that are militant climate change believers and deniers as well on the other side. So with the blog post, and I was successfully able to avoid using language that the general public has been saturated with, because I wanted to get my point across in a way that was like fresh and wasn't debilitating to read. But when I'm recording a video, I'm just doing it on the fly, so it's incredibly difficult to avoid rabbit holes that take me down a particular language path, which results in people just being like, "Oh, this is just some shit that I've heard a million times before." So I apologize in advance for mentioning things like pandemic, lockdowns, COVID-19, vaccinations, anti-vax, jab, blah blah blah, because it's shit that we've heard a million times at this point, and it's not a healthy way to communicate anymore. And but the sad thing is, similar to climate change, the more time that goes on, the more information there is, and the more concise the message becomes, and the more data there are, and that we're usually in a better position in terms of the actual information compared to when we started, whether it was starting looking at climate change or starting to look at the pandemic. Now, with the blog post, it's called Divisive Division. The reason it's divisive is because the message, I think it was some news organisation from the BBC in the UK, and that generally just convinced everybody, but due to funding, I would imagine, to just punch out the same message. Now, that message permeated social media, the legacy media, and just every kind of communication, really, that has been pushed by our leaders as well. And I think it's a very difficult time to be a leader as well. But at the same time, I think you need to make up your own mind and not just agree with the common perspective. Now, the worst thing about it and why it's so divisive is that you can't have a debate about it. It's one message: get vaccinated, and that's it. And if you don't, or if you're against it, or if you're not quite convinced, you just don't get heard. Now, the division side is that due to such poor leadership, just essentially peddling one message and not allowing any debate or alternative opinions to come to rise and influence the general public, there's just one side with the anti-vaxxers and one side with those that have been vaccinated. And it seems, the message that's been pushed by our leaders is to get vaccinated. There's no debate about it at all. And they're saying that if you're not vaccinated, you're putting everybody at risk. You're putting yourself at risk. You're putting your friends and family at risk. You're putting your children at risk. Everybody needs to get vaccinated. And I'm sure you've heard by this point the other opposing views. The fact that it's not necessarily safe, that there's long-term effects, that it delays menstrual cycles, that there's, people have myocarditis, I think it is, at varying degrees, so they say, but myocarditis is still myocarditis. People having serious health complications which aren't reflected in the studies after getting vaccinated, after they've been infected with the virus. And I might as well just say I've been vaccinated. I've had the first and second dose. My logic was I needed it to travel, which was fair enough. I'm just not going to get let into other countries or states. Or, which was kind of the inspiration for writing the blog post, was that, people that weren't vaccinated were pretty much ostracized from the community, and they weren't even allowed to go shopping to retail, cafes, hardware stores, you name it. And then even though we'd reached a certain vaccination threshold, one of the best in the world in Victoria where I live, we were still forced to check in, forced to show our vaccine certificate, even though the data said that we had reached a point where it was 95% had been vaccinated. Now, at that point, you've got to ask yourself, what's the point in still doing all this nonsense, which is kind of, no matter what you're doing, it's a reminder again and again and again and again that we're in a pandemic, that, of all the negative messaging that gets pushed out. And I think, we're all over it, and it's fair enough. But what had happened, 2 years ago at the start of this thing, was that it was quite a united front from those, from the general public, which is kind of the main thing, until our leaders just decided to draw a line in the sand. We were all pulling together. I had friends and family that were calling me regularly. I was calling them. There were Zoom calls, there were trivia nights. People were looking out for one another. And now it's just turned into this, you either fall in line or you're a piece of shit. Or the opposite is, if you're against the vaccine, that those that are vaccinated are just sheep. They're putting their life at risk. They're putting other people's life at risk, which is kind of, it's stupid that the people that have been vaccinated to say that those that aren't vaccinated are putting everybody at risk. I can understand that, maybe in a nursing home where, people have autoimmune issues, and if you go in there with the common cold, it's probably going to wreak havoc, yet alone something like COVID. There might be mild symptoms for us once we've had the vaccination, but it might be, it could be life-threatening, just a simple disease entering into the elderly population. But, there's always been that risk anyway. And it's just the virus has mutated so many times that I don't think they can argue the efficacy of the vaccination anymore, because, it's called a variant, and all these new variant terms are being thrown around. And if they're renaming the virus, surely that would mean we need a different approach to dealing with it, as opposed to just some legacy vaccination. So we went from being this homogenized front. I had friends and family that, started up their own businesses and got into, enjoying their hobbies, and whether they got government support or not, it's kind of doesn't really matter. But the government did support the public. And then, yeah, we just got to this point where you're either vaccinated or you're not vaccinated, and you're a piece of shit if you fall on either side of the camp, essentially. Especially some of my friends and family, they actually, they had friends walk away from them because they weren't vaccinated. They had family walk away from them because they weren't vaccinated. They were ostracized because they'd made a choice to not do something with their body, which should be their choice. And what I equate it to, and this is quite a controversial perspective, I'm sure, but it reminds me of abortion. I'm pro-choice. I don't think I should be able to force my opinion on somebody else to do as they please with their body, even though, like, I can see that somebody that does have an abortion is threatening a life, however you look at it. But I'm still pro-choice. I don't necessarily think they're murdering a baby, but they are they're preventing a life that could have been. And I think it is relatable to the vaccination. If you don't want to get vaccinated, people are saying you're putting other people at risk. But if you have an abortion, you're not just putting a baby at risk, you're taking it out of the equation. And yeah, it is whether you agree with it or not is fine, but the main point I'm trying to get across is that, it doesn't matter if you disagree or you agree or you think it's stupid or you think it's intelligent, it's still that person's choice. And we need to have an open discussion about it. And that's one of the worst things that's happened. There's just been no discussion about it. There's been one message, and I can understand the logic between having one message and deplatforming people that are going against it. I can understand it in a weird way. I don't think it's justifiable, but I can definitely understand having if you want to have, it's, for example, if you said something like, dealing with a fire, the best way to do it is by putting it out. But another way to go about it is by building, houses or apartment complexes so they don't catch fire. Yeah, I'm not really sure where I was going with that. But anyway, I think that people need to have the freedom to choose what they want to do with their body, and that the important thing about having a discussion is people can take out the pieces that they think are relevant to them, and the debate needs to be persuasive enough to change people's opinions or to encourage them to go in a certain direction. That's the job of a debate, not the job of, this it's this kind of News Corp alliance kind of straightforward message, just taking out the opponent. Imagine if we had a presidential debate where there was it wasn't a debate, it was just one person saying, no, this is what we're going to do. I'm sure it would make everybody's decision a bit simpler because they've only got one person to choose from, but it wouldn't really help. People wouldn't be having an informed decision, and there wouldn't be informed consent. And yeah, another way that I look at it is that you should just have, you have the right to choose what you do with yourself. You have the right to find a job. You have a right to choose which school you go to. You can not go to school if you want to. You can be a garbage man. You can be a heroin addict. You can be a junkie. You could be a bus driver, whatever it might be. You have the choice to do what you want with your life. And it shouldn't be any different with being vaccinated. And if you choose to not get vaccinated, you shouldn't be ostracized from the community. The community should be trying to convince you. They shouldn't be just saying you're a piece of shit, you're putting everybody at risk. It's a really sad direction that we've gone in, especially when this could have been quite a healthy thing for society. And another factor is, the general health advice was to have lockdowns. And it's all well and good for those that work in a hospital, that see the worst of society, that see the most critical cases, to be forcing the government to make decisions or informing the government to make decisions about preventing the loss of life. I can understand that. But at the end of the day, it's cost us a lot more than just, some elderly people dying in an old nursing home or whatever it might be. It's cost us a lot. Children have had to stay at home, not socialize with other kids. People studying their, end of year studies or exams. It's just it just would have been the biggest head fuck. And 2 years were taken away from those at a real pivotal moment in their life where they're transitioning into society out of sort of the schooling system. They weren't able to enjoy the many things that I was able to enjoy, and the freedom that I had, and the risk taking behavior that I had adopted at a young age. I was quite I was involved in a lot of risk taking behavior in my 20s, or when I was 19 after finishing high school. A lot. And I knew the risks, but I did it anyway, whether it was taking drugs, whether it was pushing myself to the limit, whether it was being involved in certain sports, driving on the road like a dickhead, all those things. It's important to find your way in this world, and people deserve the dignity to take risks. It's that simple. Everybody should have the right to choose, how much risk they take on board. It's like outlawing skydiving or getting on an aeroplane or driving a car because too many people die of it. And if you want to minimize, your risk, and it's debatable whether it is, get vaccinated. But if you want to take the risk, or you don't think the risks of being vaccinated and the long-term effects are worth it, that's your choice to make. And yeah, I think I'll end it there because I'm kind of going in loops a little bit. It's quite hard to do this on the fly, but at the end of the day, you should be pro-choice, and you shouldn't be ostracizing your friends and family that choose not to get vaccinated. By all means, try and persuade them, but if you feel like you're hitting a ball against a brick wall, maybe you should stop and let them think about what they'd like to do with themselves. Cheers.